Alright, so do you want to actually start now?
No.
No, okay.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the very first episode of our podcast, and the podcast name is Jesse's Room. We did a pilot 2 weeks ago from when you are listening to this now, and if you want to get a sense of what we're going to be doing, then you could go ahead and watch that. It was on the films Mamma Mia 2008 and Fight Club. Also, there is a co-host.
Yes, hello, I am the co-host.
Okay.
And since Ben didn't introduce, you want to say who you are?
Oh yeah, my name is Ben. Hello. I am also the co-host. I run the Twitter account. That's what I do.
Yes.
Speaking of Twitter, we have Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, YouTube, and Spotify, depending on what. And actually, we're on. I didn't even tell you. We're on several other places as well. I believe Google Podcasts. I don't know what that
Really?
is. Yeah, We're actually on
Nice.
several places. So many I don't even know them all. Sufferings from success, you could say.
Very nice.
That was awful. I'm gonna cut that. I also edit the audio, so um, but yeah, this is a film discussion podcast. We just sort of pick two, sometimes more, sometimes less. We will see. But films, movies that we sort of thought would be funny or would go well together in a discussion. And Rora, why don't you? Oh, the co-host name is Rora, by
Yes,
the
I am
way.
Rora. Oh, I
Um,
thought I introduced myself.
that might be important, but
A little bit, yeah.
no, it's fine. It's fine. We're doing fine. Why don't you tell the lovely viewers about what we are discussing today?
Yeah, sure. So we are discussing the recent Marvel film that was released, Widow. Wow, I just choked over my words there. Black Widow. And paired with that is it 91 or 99? I think it's
99.
99. Yeah, 99. Okay. 99 film Audition. I believe
It's a
it's
Japanese film from director
Japanese film.
Takashi
Okay.
Takashi Miike,
Very
who
nice.
you some of you know, I hope. Some of you have no idea what we're talking about. But that's the gimmick of the podcast, is that one person likes Marvel and the other person likes Takashi Miike.
Okay, that is just low.
Well, it's true.
That well, yeah, but not in an insulting way.
Well, hey, that's our selling point right now. We gotta
That's
go
true.
with it.
That's true. Yeah, that's fair. All
Yeah.
right.
But yeah, also, before we get too far in, make sure if you do follow us on Twitter, or if you do have a Twitter, make sure to follow us, and so that you can submit your questions, and we will answer them at the end of the podcast. Usually these will be tweeted out in advance, but we
Somebody
forgot.
forgot to do that. No, no, somebody forgot to do that.
Yeah. One of the co-hosts forgot to do that, and
Yeah, yeah.
I just tweeted it. Right now it's 1:13. I tweeted it at 1:03, so 10 minutes ago, and we've already gotten one question. So yeah, maybe we'll get a good amount of traction going. But in the future, make sure you're looking out for that. So yeah, I say we are ready to jump right into the show.
All right, awesome. Did you have anything specific you wanted to start off on, or
Um, well, I'll let you I'll let you introduce this one. I'll introduce the one
okay?
after because, um,
Because I'm the Marvel fan. Yes.
well, because we each liked the selections more than the other.
That's fair. All right, I'll introduce it. So, Black Widow is not the origin story, but it's the first solo film for the character Black Widow, played by Scarlett Johansson. And this takes place after Captain America Civil War, which came out in 2016, and before Avengers Infinity War, which came out in 2018. And it basically tells the story of how Natasha Romanoff has to go on this mission to sort of defeat the Red Room, which she already thought she had destroyed. And along the way, meets members of her past, like her family and everything. And it's a whole big, like, it's just another Marvel movie, you know? It's like, it has the whole, like, theatrics and the heartfelt moments and the action and everything. But, yeah. It's part, you know, this the fact that it's part of such a big franchise sometimes will, you know, sort of make it like hard to judge it, or not judge it, but rather like view it as its own isolated like movie, which has its pros and cons, you know, because on the whole, on a pro side, you are used to these characters and you are familiar with these characters, and it's nothing surprising really happens. But as a con, you know, it's sort of hard to take away from that and appreciate it on its own, because you're so ingrained in this way of like this film like world, you know, and so it's slightly difficult to sort of get out of that headspace. But yeah, regardless, it is, you know, a standalone movie, so to speak, in the franchise. But yeah.
Well, for me, I have no really like brand loyalty to Marvel. I kind of, you know, I didn't really grow up watching these movies. I didn't really, I have no like deep personal connection to it as a franchise. I just view them as a series of movies, and I think a lot of them in general are, you know, for what they are, they're incredibly adequate. I think they're very well competent, I would say. They serve their purpose incredibly well for what they are. Um, but that being said, for me, it's very easy to sort of view these as just as, you know, individual films.
So honestly, the thing that like I thought this was a pretty good movie. I really enjoyed it. But the part of it that for me is was most not important, but most impactful and like resonated the most, which I guess we can talk about first, was the actual like script of it. Like lately, I know you haven't seen any of the shows, but lately Marvel has been like on their game with the scripts, because they're just so like realistic. You know, like obviously like none of this is realistic, you know, they're all superheroes and everything, but the older films, they were all like more too too what you would expect. You know what I mean? Like Captain America would have like the most like, oh, we're gonna fight these guys back. You know, it's very like not unnatural, but less like human and more like soldier like, or like too perfect like, you know what I mean? And lately there's been a lot of you know, like interactions specifically in this movie where it's so much more natural, and like it's much more like relatable. I mean, one of my favorite parts was it was like a conversation between Yelena and Natasha, the vest part. Do you remember that part when they're in the car and she's like talking about her vest, and then she's like, "You like my vest? I know you like my vest." And Natasha was like, "Yeah, of course I like it." And she just kind of goes, "Yes," you know, like it's so human, you know what I mean? And it just really like the dynamic between all of them and the way that the writers wrote their characters, it's just like so humane, you know, and like it really just like I loved it. I thought it was so well done. And you know, especially for like a movie with this like, because I mean, if you think about it, the Red Room was like a horrible, horrible place. Like it was really bad, you know, and it could have had so much more of like a darker aesthetic, but like they kind of like broke up and like hid how dark the subject matter really was through you know, the dialogue and through like specifically mostly it was the scenes with Yelena, whether it was like her calling out Natasha for like posing or whatever. Like it was so funny, you know, and it kind of just like took you like back for a minute, and you're like, this is a Marvel movie, you know what I mean? It doesn't have to be that dark. And I really enjoyed it. I thought they've been doing a really good job with that lately. But yeah.
Well, I completely disagree with
All
pretty
right.
much everything you just said.
All right, all right.
Um,
Let's hear
I
it.
thought this is probably one of the definitely one of the weaker Marvel movies I've ever seen, and I've seen all of them, so I don't know why I said I've ever. Anyway, I haven't seen the television series, which maybe I don't think there were any connections except post-credit scene, right?
No, there's no connection. Yeah.
I thought the post-credit scene had something to do with
The
something. I didn't.
post-credit scene, the only thing that was as relevant was the lady who showed her like the picture of Clint was in the show briefly.
Yeah, I didn't
Yeah.
know who that was, and I looked it up.
Yeah.
But no, I thought. Well, I think we should also. I saw your rating,
Yes.
and it was. I mean, it's one thing like to give it a rating, but I looked at the other Marvel movies, and according to your rating, this is one of like the top like 3 or 4, and so
It
I.
is, yes. I believe so. It was definitely top 10. Yeah, I gave it 4 stars.
But no, I thought for sure this is probably in my bottom 4 of Marvel. I thought this was really just a well, I just thought that they really kind of blew it with the potential of having a solo Black Widow movie, which they've sort of hinted at doing for 10 years or however long it's been,
Yeah.
and just sort of like. I mean, there's so much potential for. I mean, you expect Black Widow. It's going to be like a spy type of movie or something like that. Um, and going back to sort of face the past, because obviously, I mean, you kind of know where her character ends up, which was why it was kind of a weird time to do a solo Black Widow movie when you know what happens to the character in the later films. But no, I kind of found much of the sort of plot to sort of revolve too much around things which were, I mean, incredibly dark, especially for Marvel movie. And if they wanted to go for that sort of darker tone, I mean, it wasn't like too dark really, but it was just like the things that they were implying. They tried to have it both ways really. They were trying to have it be this sort of like a fun action movie for kids, sort of dumbing it down, not dumbing it down, but keeping it too, I mean, stupid, frankly, to be really like enjoyed as like an adult watching it, because you can kind of, for like a lot of things which are primarily aimed for younger audiences, you can go, oh, okay, I mean, of course that's kind of dumb, but hey, it's a fun movie, I can go with it. But with this, I think usually they can find that blend very well, but with this I thought it was sort of all mixed up, which I think I kind of attribute to the another big issue I had, which was sort of just like it never felt like a Black Widow movie. It
Yeah,
felt
that's
like
true.
it really felt like there were most of it was establishing new characters, which I mean it's pretty much guaranteed all of whom will show up in future MCU projects, and also just sort of like, because I mean, I really like the idea that this is just sort of a standalone thing, which is what Marvel really needs to do right now, just sort of building back up momentum following Endgame. But well, plus a lot of the action just really fell short, especially like the direction was so essentially like non-existent. Like it just really felt like, I mean, they do this for a lot of them, but it just really felt like before they even have a script done, it just feels like they're already starting with a lot of the like CG visual effects and stuff, so that by the time they actually have a script, it's mostly just like stringing bits of over the top unrealistic action, which stems into sort of another issue of like incredibly like low stakes, really, because this is an operation which had already been existing for many many years and would continue to exist had not uh Scarlett Johansson sort of stumble upon it just by coincidence. Almost, it's like the stakes are really not established and nothing felt like there was consequence to the character. Like she survives pretty much everything that's thrown. Like she survives worse things than what she dies to in Endgame. So it's just like what? Why it just really deflated all tension for the character.
Yeah, that I actually do agree with. But I don't think I wasn't expecting that to be any better because again, she was already dead. Um, so even if they had like made her break an arm or something, it still I think would have had the same effects. I think timing really, because like I went into that thinking that what you just said, like with the low stakes, but I don't think they could have remedied that except just making this movie like 4 years ago. You know what I mean?
Well, no, I think that, I mean, any film should work alone as a film. I don't think like timing and, franchise or no franchise, I still think that the film does like that. I don't think that's a valid excuse for a film having, character issues with the, protagonist, because even though we do know who this character is and, backstory or some backstory, we learn a lot of backstory in this, but, and, we know who this character is, a lot about her. It's still, as a film, it should still be able to communicate everything that it needs to, regardless of timing and things like that, placement
No, yeah,
in
100,
franchise.
100%. I just meant like either way, for me, it would have had the same. That's why I wasn't bothered by it, is because she dies anyway. So if that was like a personal thing, it didn't bother me so much. But no, yeah, you're right. I wasn't saying that. But yeah.
Like, I really don't love Marvel films as a whole. Like, I think there's good films. I appreciate it on a for what they've done in terms of like a franchise and a cinematic universe. Obviously, I respect and like acknowledge all that it's done, but I think the individual films, as a whole, the majority are, I find mediocre. And this was just sort of one sort of tier down from the standard one. Like usually they're able to keep that like plot, and they're able to balance the action, the plot, and the sort of image of superhero film, and they're sort of able to balance all of those together. And with this one, I felt like no, all of those aspects were weak enough for it not to be sort of, it just didn't come together like the other ones.
That's fair. I mean, I wouldn't expect anything better from a non-Marvel fan, so that's an accurate
Well,
assessment.
I mean, I mean, I'm a fan of good movies. Like I have
Oh,
no
now you're gonna
loyalty.
have the whole internet against you.
Well, I mean, I just don't have any sense of brand loyalty to anything. I mean, I like a lot of the DC stuff. I like some of the Marvel stuff. That doesn't make me, that doesn't mean I like DC more than Marvel. That just means I think some of the DC movies are better than some of the Marvel movies. And I think a lot of the Marvel movies are better than a lot of the DC movies. Those are just sort of the example because those are like the rival, comic book companies or whatever. And it's just like you know, we talk about adaptations and characters and, pre-existing properties and stuff. It all gets kind of muddied because I was thinking, like, my sister and her friends tried to go and see this, and they had seen no previous Marvel stuff, and they left. Like, they literally walked out of the theater and I think snuck into Boss Baby, because they were confused. They had no idea what was going on. And so it is kind of like, it's an interesting time where it's like this property has had so much depth to it that now, like, the average audience member will suffer from not having seen, I mean, basically 25 plus films. Like, it's not like, even like something, I guess an example would be Fast and Furious like 9 or whatever the new one is. Like, you could, if you're a diehard fan of the series, like, you could be like, oh, the new one's coming out, I'm gonna binge watch all of them before. But it's like with this, you can't really do that with Marvel because it's like literally so much like film. There's just so much content that you would have to consume to like keep up, and they usually are able to balance that. But because this is sort of like a side thing, prequel slash sequel slash in between thing, it's like the average audience member really, like, their enjoyment of the film would be sort of harmed by their lack of not seeing. They're essentially being punished for not having seen the previous 25 or however many films. Which, I mean, there's nothing that you could really do to fix that, really. I just think it's an interesting point that we're at. Like, that's not really a negative. That's not, like, the film couldn't, it's the 26th film. They can't really do anything about that. But it's just an interesting point.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, honestly, my friend for the last like week and a half pretty much watched all of them, like all the Marvel movies, because she hadn't really seen any of them. So it is doable. It's just not something you'd probably want to do. Um, but more importantly, I think that Marvel realizes that because, like, I mean, again, you haven't really seen the shows, but I'm pretty sure like you could watch all of those with like minimal knowledge of it, of the MCU, and especially all the stuff that's coming out, like Shang-Chi, The Eternals, um, like all of those movies that are coming out are like completely new um additions, and so I think that they've realized that. And I think especially after Endgame, they sort of hit a point where like, what more can you do now? Like with the original Avengers. I mean, yeah, they still have Thor 4 coming out. But they're started to stray away from that, I think, because they're realizing how difficult it would be to catch up. Which I think is interesting because I think this is probably, if not the one of the biggest franchises, right? I think probably if you include all the different iterations of James Bond, I think that would probably be pretty close, but I think this is one of the biggest, right?
Oh, you mean in terms of volume?
Yeah, just like how many movies are intertwined with each other. I think this
Um,
is probably, if not one of definitely the biggest, you know.
I believe so.
Yeah.
I can't really think of anything other than that, but let me look.
No, I think it's not important. My point is that I think that they're trying to take that into account is what I was saying. Like, and I think you're right. It is difficult to catch up if you're just getting into it. And which always was like that was always a concern. Like even like all the way like 5 years ago, you know what I mean? There was like 10 movies probably at that point, maybe like 15. Which is a lot. And they're like relatively long too. They're usually like on average 2 hours. You know, but yeah, so I think Black Widow probably is one of the last movies that's going to be so strictly connected to the previous ones,
Yeah.
which is
Well,
interesting.
it was even that is frustrating because there was huge. I mean, they could have easily had this be. I mean, they had minimal connection, but it didn't. It never felt like just a standalone uh film about just the Black Widow character going
Yeah,
off and having an adventure on her own. Maybe, I mean, going back, the past is coming back to haunt her or whatever.
yeah,
It felt way more, forced than that, really. And it really just sort of felt like a lot of it, like, to get these new characters in. Well, plus the action scenes, like, were technically like a step down from a lot of the other stuff. Like, there were some really bad effects in this, and the action, like I already talked about, there's no really tension because I mean, it takes you out of the film essentially to see someone fall like 7 stories and like land on cement and then just sort of like sit up, like saying ow, and then getting up and starting to
yeah,
sprint and jump out of a car and stuff. And I mean, it's one thing, but well, plus it's like she's just a human, and she's
yeah,
not. And in that specific part, she wasn't even in like any armor or anything. She was just in like, I think, civilian clothes, even, because she was trying to blend in or whatever. And so, like, I mean, there's a level of disbelief, sure, because I mean, it's Marvel, it's a fun superhero movie, but like at that point, that's when you start, like, when that starts breaking down, you start like noticing, like, oh, she's not in that car, that's very clearly second unit stuff, or like, oh, that's really bad green screen. And it's just like all that stuff like starts to fall apart, and you sort of start to like pick it apart. And especially that's when the plot really starts to sort of crumble as well, when you're not engaged and when you're not sort of invested in all of the things that are happening. The film has to keep the audience member engaged, and when it fails to sort of deliver these things, I mean, that's when you start like nitpicking everything. And if it sounds like that's sort of what I'm doing, it's because I wasn't, interested by the plot. and I felt that like it just didn't justify, for one thing, the runtime, which it's like almost 2.5 hours. And it just never felt like it justified really its own existence.
I mean, on a certain level, you're right. Like, you're right with like the whole like stakes thing, and like the plot is not airtight. Um, especially since they had to like fit it in between two very specific events. Um, but yeah, I wanted to go back to what you said about the fact that this was more like not really a solo movie anymore. Because I honestly like I'm a diehard Marvel fan. I grew up watching these movies, but ever since like Civil War, I've always like it's not annoying, but it's always been kind of like irksome that they had so like as cool as everybody is, like so many characters was just like I mean like Infinity War and Endgame alone were like probably like the highest like um speaking character count that I can think of in like one scene, not like overall, but like in one scene. But like, I mean, Captain America Civil War is a Cap solo movie, but not many people realize that because like everybody was in it. Like that was supposed to be the last of like the Cap trilogy, right? And like ever since then it's kind of been like, oh, we're just gonna get as many characters in as possible, which is cool to an extent, but it also like takes away from like that person. And I think that if they had like as cool as like the Red Guardian was, and I loved his character and I love David Harbour, I feel like if they hadn't like gone to the prison to break him out, um like that was just like I mean like the only thing he did really was bring them to Rachel Weisz's character, and like after that obviously he fought and stuff, but the only thing he did to drive the plot forward like specifically was take them there, which she probably could have figured out on her own with like a day or two more of like spy investigative work, which so I get what you're saying. It wasn't like the most airtight of plots, and it did have some parts where you're like, well, this is just like doesn't make sense, like especially with the action scenes. I do agree that like specifically the scene like when she falls out onto the cement and the girl dies for the first time, not the first time, the second time. Yeah, that was definitely very you're like, oh, that wasn't
Well, no,
great.
no, no, no. But it's not only that. But then right after that, like she gets up and sees that, and then directly after that, she like starts sprinting, and like they drive a car like into a subway thing. The car flips over, and then they like slide out,
Yeah.
and it's just like, at what point is like a line has to be drawn somewhere of like the point of realism and sort of being shattered,
Yeah.
and like it really does take you out of the movie, because it's like these aren't really like real characters, and then once that starts to fall apart, it's just like none of the character stuff was really working either, because these aren't, you know, characters that I really know anything about. I mean, I know Natasha Romanoff because she was sort of a side character in a bunch of these movies, but I don't really know much else about all of these other new characters which are being introduced, and they sort of, that's why because the film opens with that sort of 15-20 minute flashback to their childhood and them fleeing the US, which that entire sequence could have very easily been cut, and it would have helped the runtime a lot, I think. I don't think that really helped establish anything at all. And instantly the horrible, horrible cover over the titles it was just very bizarre. It was a bizarre way to open the film, because like you don't know who any of these characters are. You kind of figure out, oh, that's Natasha, oh, this is her origin. It's just like everything, and then everything that's set up is basically reiterated several times throughout the film, and so it's like you very easily could have just like not had that. That was sort of like the beginning of like a bunch of structural issues, and like from that the plot is very much like, oh, we have to go to this place so that we know how to get to this place so that we know how to get to this place, and hey, it's our low point and we're being led to the big place, and now that we're here we're going to do stuff, and then the movie's over. You know, it just really felt like just not repetitive necessarily, but just like bland, really, because the action that like mediocre to bad at times, and it just really wasn't engaging because it was just like, okay, after this action scene, now we're gonna go to this place and wait until the next action scene starts, and it's just like I think what I'm confused about is like why not like why do you think this is good, but why do you think this is like so good compared to like a lot of the other ones?
Well, it's not. Well, first of all, I'm gonna go back to what you said before, but really quick, this is like 10. This I like checked. This is top. This is like number 10 on my list, so it's not top 5. I don't know where you got that from.
Well, just
Um.
because I looked through like your other ratings, like
Oh yeah. Well, I did actually list them because I was bored
oh,
one
did you
day.
do a rank? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Here, I have that pulled up.
Um,
Okay.
but no, yeah. I mean, I honestly, I don't know why I liked it so much. Like, yeah, there were major problems with it, but I've always been one for characters as opposed to story. Like, if a character's really good and the plot's really bad, I can sometimes look past it and sort of be like, oh, this person's really cool. Um,
But
but I
but
mean,
what was the characters? Like that's
I
I
mean,
don't
honestly, I don't. I just liked all the characters. Like to go back to what I said about like the interactions between them, I just thought it was really like it was just it made me like smile. You know what I mean? Like it just made me like genuinely be like the real world. It's I mean obviously it's not the real world, but I'm like the world is not so bad because even though these people are like almost dying every 5 seconds or not really, but like it just like the interactions between them were so like I don't know, like that's just stuff that I would like say to like my friends or my sibling, you know what I mean? Like them arguing about like how she's like, "Oh, I don't pose with it." Like I love that. It's just like it's so like it's obviously you do, but you're like it's your sister, so to speak, but you're trying to prove you're right even though you're blatantly wrong, you know what I mean? Or like at the end when Yelena does it and she's like, "Oh god, that was gross. I can't believe I just did." Like it's just so like it's as opposed to like the sort of stiff like superheroes that we've been seeing, not like stiff but like the always be good, like even Tony Stark, as sarcastic as they always wrote him to be, he was so sarcastic that like anytime anybody exhibited sarcasm in any other thing they'd be like, oh, that's like Tony, you know what I mean? Like it was just like it was always like too theatrical, whereas like I don't know, something about the dialogue and the way that they interacted to me just like was so like encapsulating that I kind of was like ready to forgive the somewhat unrealistic parts, the majorly unrealistic parts, and the parts where sort of the plot fell apart, because I was like, I always wanted to see what they would like say next. Yeah, I don't know, it might just be me being weird, but I genuinely like really enjoyed their interactions like between all of the characters, like even like David Harbour's character, like the whole thing, like all of his like dialogue, he was like made out to be like this like lovable idiot, you know what I mean? Like he's like a bad guy, but he's like still cares about these people, you know what I mean? It's just like they were all just like to me very like the chemistry, like it worked relatively well together, and I just genuinely was enjoying it, and that was like the main thing for me that stuck out, which is quite different than all the other movies, which is why it was ranked so high. Well, not so high, but like higher than most of them.
so just the family dynamic
I
essentially.
guess. I don't know. I mean, I'm a sucker for like family dynamics in movies, but
It was just like it didn't like service anything though. Like it was
yeah,
essentially
no,
the
I
parts
know.
you're talking about is just like idle dialogue in between the actual stuff that matters. Like none of it felt very deep because you don't really know any of these characters and they aren't really fleshed out at all. Like you said, the David Harbour character, who was probably the best part of the film, um, like was just sort of the lovable idiot. And I mean, they added um the depth to the mother character was essentially that she was a traitor, but also she really deep down loved the family. And it's just like I other than that like sort of not quirky dialogue, but just like the dialogue they have together. I don't. If to me it was just like it was essentially had no depth to it. Like it was just in service of the plot, which was, as I've already discussed, um, sort of stupid. Or not stupid, but um it just sort of, the whole thing started to collapse in on itself because it just really didn't amount to much.
I mean, that's fair. I don't know. I just like again, it wasn't the best movie, you know, like it I genuinely did enjoy it. Like I think also you have to view this as what it is. Like you're not looking at like some, indie like film festival winner here. You know what I mean? Like it's a
Well,
Marvel movie, you know?
well, I view movies as movies. I mean, I'm not going to give it a pass because it's a
No, no, no. I
superhero
That's not what
movie.
I'm saying. I'm saying
Well then,
it's no. Well, you didn't let me finish here. I was going to say that if you step back from like the blatant like holes in the plot and the blatant just like this doesn't make sense, it was enjoyable, which is why I liked it. I wasn't saying that it from a uh analyst lens. It's like a phenomenal movie. I'm just saying that I genuinely enjoyed it because I sort of was not really looking into the innermost aspects of it, and was sort of just like letting myself watch it as a Marvel fan and as just like a like I sort of wasn't like picking it apart, which obviously there were some major issues with it, and I'm not saying there weren't. I'm just saying that I've like personally enjoyed it from a just like a movie like viewer in general. You know what I mean? Like a lot of people had similar issues with it to what you were saying, and I totally get them. I mean, like the scene at the end, like I literally had to go to the bathroom and I was gone for like 5 minutes and they were in the same like setting. I don't know if there's like a scene that happened in between, but I left and they were in the office with Dreykov, and then I came back and she was still in the office with Dreykov. So like I get what you're saying. Like there are some major issues with it. Um, which is why it's not like top 3 or it's not like my favorite one. But
well,
I thought
for
it
the
was.
record, for the people who can't see the list, it's above Endgame, Infinity War, Guardians of the Galaxies, both of them. So I mean, you're not. I mean, you can't downplay it as like you
Well,
didn't
no, I'm
like
not
it. I
saying
mean,
that. I'm not saying that's what I'm saying. I did like it. I genuinely did. And I think I more liked it just because, like, I mean, the big cast movies are obviously really fun, and I loved Endgame. I really did. And I also love Civil War, which is also below this. But I just like I always appreciate the solo ones. I mean, like this is probably not a popular opinion, but the first Avenger, like the first Cat movie, is my favorite Marvel movie. Just because like I love the backstory, I love the solo movies, you know what I mean? So I just genuinely like I like this movie. I really did. Not from a technical standpoint, just from like an enjoyment standpoint. Um, but I do get like the whole like the issues that everybody's been having with it because it is obvious that there were a bunch of them, but I still think that it did a serviceable job and it was definitely better than some of the Marvel movies. So that's my stance on it.
yeah, I maybe it's just a me thing, I guess, but I watch all movies the exact same way. Like
Yeah.
there's no genre. Like I don't watch things by genre. I don't watch things really by trailer, by actor, even really by director. I just watch, films as films, and maybe that is just sort of to my own detriment, but I'm not really part of a fandom in the same way that like I would watch a Marvel movie because it's a Marvel movie. I would watch a Marvel movie because it's a movie. And so going into it, my only like expectations were I hope this is a good movie, not I hope this is a good Marvel movie about my good fun character Natasha Romanoff. Which is a me thing. I mean, yeah, but um it just really it felt, but I feel like I'm being too critical of Marvel as a whole. I really like a lot of like the I think probably my favorite would I don't know, I have to do a ranked list of my own, but no, I really liked a lot of the Marvel films, but it just felt like this one really just like was essentially low effort. Like it really felt like they wrote the script after they had done a lot of the like pre-visual effects essentially, which is a thing that they do, by the way. they start those before they even have a script. But and so it just really felt like uh it really just fell short. It just felt like there was so much they could have done with the character, and it all just serviced this essentially like non-plot, where it's just like I felt like nothing was learned about. There was no real character drama either, because I mean we already know this character. Like we've seen her before, and we've seen her after this film, and so it's like we know nothing really changes in between those 2 points of time. Like the character isn't going to be changed by this film. And so I feel like because of that, they sort of shifted the emphasis onto the action, the other characters, the sort of drama, the sort of social commentary, which you could sort of dig into, which essentially was just like was painted as an overcoat onto this like making the villain seem like an evil guy, which is like it felt really formulaic. Formulaic, that was the word I was trying to think of earlier when I was talking about the structure. Formulaic of just like we got to go here, now we're going to go here, now we're here. These are our characters. Let's go punch the bad guy in the face
I mean, like
because
that's true for most Marvel movies,
well,
though.
no,
Like,
but usually they're able to, you're engaged because the characters are interesting and have depth and the conflict. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of them where the villains are just like bad guy of the week, but there's a lot of them where, I mean, obviously you're not going to have a Thanos in every single one, but a lot of them have, you know, interesting conflicts at least. Like, and then and then even from that, like it gets undercut by the just sort of dumb, massive, like punching sequence. Like, I think, it was Black Panther, which had like really interesting conflict, I thought. It had a really good, villain, with the, Michael B. Jordan character. I don't remember. Killmonger. Yes, I thought that whole conflict was really good, and then it just ended up for the last 20 minutes just being people punching each other on CGI rhinos. You know, like I feel like that's really becoming an issue, and I think this film just sort of fell into that as well. But I didn't think there was really any redeeming parts of this other than some of the performances, like we said, David Harbour, as the Red Guardian, who's probably the coolest Marvel guy ever. That was a joke. It was pretty cool. Like, other than that, I mean, it wasn't like the worst thing I've ever seen. It was still like, I mean, you pour so much money into these things. Like, of course, like on a technical level, it's not going to be like bad. Like, I wouldn't call like as a whole this movie bad. I definitely think it's subpar as a film, and especially as a Marvel film.
no, I think you're right. Like a lot of the stuff that you said, like you're just there are issues with it, but I think that overall, like I was able to overlook it to a certain extent. But honestly, I thought that all of the like this whatever you have to say about the movie, I genuinely thought that all the actors did a pretty good job. Like I really liked Florence Pugh. Is that how you pronounce her last name?
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah, it
I
is.
really liked her performance in it. I mean, Rachel Weisz is great. And I think Scarlett Johansson I think probably this is my favorite performance of her as Black Widow, regardless of the script or whatever. I thought she did a great job acting in it. I thought the actors were all like really good.
Well, yeah, I didn't mean like I don't think that I think Scarlett Johansson is a great actor. Um, Florence Pugh. Well, I just meant in general, but no, I don't think any of their performances were really uh like not good. I thought those were. I think David Harbour definitely had the sort of best performance in this one for me, but no, I don't think any of them were bad. I thought Florence Pugh had some moments which were not great, but no, I don't want it to seem like I think the actors themselves are bad. I just think they weren't really given anything to much to do anyway. Like and Scarlett Johansson sort of didn't do great in the action stuff because a lot of it looked like she was again like second unit like stunt double stuff. So other than that, I agree. I did just want to say that like actors pretty good.
Yeah.
Is that it?
Uh, yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, we can rate it if you want, but other than that, I think that's it. Yeah. Well, I mean, my absolute favorite scene was right before they get captured and David Harbour's character starts singing American Pie. I love that scene. Genuinely was wholesome. 10 out of 10 recommend watching just that scene. But yeah, that's pretty much
Yeah.
it.
For me, a lot of the humor fell flat, but that was mainly because I wasn't enjoying the other stuff. And so when we did like slow down for the humor, it was just like didn't feel deserved essentially. But plus, I mean, I don't know. There was just a lot of like, isn't it funny that Russia bad? And it was just like
That's
it got
fair, yeah.
old. Or like, isn't it funny that communism? It was like, yeah, that's really really funny, but like it really just sort of. I thought a lot of the David Harbour stuff, like the family dynamic was like there. It just never felt like it serviced. Like in a different movie, I think it would have been really entertaining. I don't want it to seem like this doesn't have any potential. Um, I just didn't think it really did.
That's
um,
fair.
I it didn't really do much with what they had. I thought that a lot of it just really like I mean I'm just repeating myself, but it just serviced this like non-villain of just like this guy who's going to like none of it really made any sense in terms of the conflict, so much so that I don't even really feel the need to discuss it. But just like the whole idea of like going back to face your past in this time where you can't like go to your new home, so you have to go back to where you came from. And like that idea for a Black Widow movie would be really good. But from that, I just really feel like they kind of phoned it in with this one, frankly. It just sort of felt like we have to make a Black Widow movie. We're going to make a Black Widow movie. What should we do? Oh, we'll bring in the Red Avenger. We're going to bring in all these
Red
other
Guardian.
or yeah, but you know what I mean. Like
Yeah.
it just like really it never felt like they were doing it because they had something to do. It just felt like something they had to do. I think that was sort of the main. Everything else just sort of stemmed from that.
Yeah, that's fair.
And I mean, we can talk more about like the villain and like the sort of meta to it of just like the sort of manipulation of women to do like the things that the evil big man guy is controlling them, stuff like that. But it really felt surface level, like I don't know, it was so like muddled in like trying to not explicitly say what they were doing. That's almost like I feel like I can't even talk about it because I don't even know what they were going for, you know?
Yeah, that was like the main issue. I like that was like the big problem that I really like didn't like because the villain was just I honestly I thought the villain was pretty bad. Um, and I still don't get like the pheromones thing. That was like really I was like that doesn't even make sense. I was like,
Um,
okay, that's just genuinely not even makes sense.
I was
But
I,
yeah,
I
no.
was full out like laughing at that part. Like
Yeah.
but at that point I was
Yeah.
just laughing at a lot of the stuff. But
Yeah.
yeah.
I didn't like what they did with Taskmaster either. Like I mean like I there's been rumors going around that Taskmaster was going to be a female in this movie because in the comics Taskmaster was a guy, which is fine. I don't like have a problem with that, but I just don't like the idea that it was like his daughter that he was like mind controlling to be like like that was just kind of stupid. I really
So
didn't
that
like that.
see that's the thing. Like I didn't know I didn't like I don't know who the Taskmaster is like in a comic. Like
Yeah.
I kept seeing that character like reoccurring. I was like, "Oh wow, that's like the big bad guy." But like outside of like if you don't know who that is like outside of the film, then it's just like it really didn't have much to do. Like it just felt like a total like throwaway like thing. Yeah, it just really there wasn't much like to supplement it outside of that. Like it really was building up to the villains and like their master plan or whatever, and then it just never really delivered. Like it was all building up to that, and then it never really did anything from that. And there's stuff like with the character dynamics and everything, but it just that as well always felt like it was in service to this bigger plot, which they just didn't deliver on.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess we can keep talking a bit about the sort of conflict meta stuff a little bit more, because that's sort of what we're going to tie into the next film.
Okay.
Because I don't know how much more you have to say.
No, yeah, I pretty much got through everything I had to say.
Oh, there's another part where like the sister, Florence Pugh, like stabs this person like in the stomach in like the middle of the street. This was towards the beginning of the film when like she first gets like the red
Oh, you
chemicals or
mean
whatever.
okay, yeah, 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 yeah.
Before she like defects from the red room or whatever.
Yeah.
And she's like chasing down this person, and she stabs her like I think she like even slits like open her stomach. I was like, this was early on in the film, so I was like, oh wow, this is kind of like a darker thing. And then it's just like she falls like sort of face like down onto the concrete, and then like she flips her over. I don't remember quite what for. I think she was getting the
To get the chemicals, yeah.
chemicals, yeah. But like she flips her over, and like on her shirt it's just like torn, and like I think it's like wet, like there's some water on it, and like that's it. And I'm just like, why have this like horrific violent part if you can't like follow it up with anything more than that, you know? Yes, that's what I was saying, like they're trying to have it both ways, and it's just like, why include that if you're not gonna like actually go with it? And that was sort of something that was reiterated throughout the film, which I sort of attribute to like Disney being Disney, you know? Um,
Yeah.
for another example, something that really bothered me was the Red Guardian, not Avenger. Um, like on his hands, he had knuckle tattoos. And I think, in fact, one of the, like the first shots that we see him, he's like arm wrestling a bunch of people, and we see very clearly on his knuckles the word Carl with a K. And obviously you sort of know what's going to be on the other hand, but every single time we repeatedly cut to his hand, always showing the Carl side of the tattoo, and you know what's on the other hand, like you know what's on the other hand. And in fact, the only time we see that hand like in a close-up is like upside down, and so it all barely lasts for a second, so you can't really see the marks, but you can barely, like, they keep cutting to the Carl one because they they want you to see, like they want you to kind of be able to know, like that's what's on his hand, that's what's on its hand, but they never cut to the marks one, and it's so like obvious, and it's just like, why have that if you like aren't going to allow the viewer to like see it? And obviously that's, you know, Disney's influence. They don't want that in their, you know, Marvel movie because they're Disney. And so it's just like, but why have it in the first place? But because you could very clearly like see they were kind of being cheeky about it, but it was like, you know what's on the other hand, and they want you to know what's on the other hand, but they won't show you because that would be against Disney's terms and service.
Yeah.
And so that was another thing with the conflict, where it's just like trying to have it both ways of just like being fun kids movie, like with sort of not like airtight David Fincher plot, but also wanting to have like darker, more real world serious stuff in there. Um, yeah, I didn't like this movie. That's about it. Should we do ratings now, or do you have more to
Yeah, we can
say?
do ratings. No, I think I got everything.
Okay, I gave this film a 4 out of 10. Rora, what did you give this film?
I gave this film, so we're doing out of 10. I gave it a 8 out of 10.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's crazy. Okay, we are an hour and 13 minutes into the podcast. How about we switch over to the next film of the day?
Sounds good. You want to introduce it?
I would.
Okay, go.
So now we get to talk about a film directed by a man named Takashi Miike. This is the only film I've actually seen from him, although I know a lot about him. He is sort of like insane. He's directed like so many movies. I want to say like 1 year he directed like 6 movies just in like the 1 year. Like he was sort of like, and they're all of them are like such a range where it's like dumb kids movies all the way to like super. I mean, obviously you've seen the film that we're about to talk about, which is not a kids movie.
No, it's totally a kids movie.
It is for the first half. But no, we are talking about the 1999 film Audition. Um, I saw it recently because, well, I'd been on my radar for a while. But I watched it recently just sort of on a whim. It was like 2 in the morning, which I thought was sort of good conditions for this type of thing. And I was not disappointed. Audition is a film about a man who has been widowed, or not widowed. What's the male? A widower for 7 years following the death of his wife. He's just sort of a company executive type of guy, and he has a teenage son. Because this is 7 years later, the son was sort of just a little boy when the mother died in the hospital, which is the opening of the film. So it's not a spoiler or anything. Do not worry, I will not spoil the film yet.
Yes, spoilers
And
ahead.
ahead, you can keep listening for now. We will specify. But
Yes.
so this company executive guy, being
Well,
general
he's a
here.
producer. He's a producer.
Yes, that is a good specification. He is encouraged by his son and his coworker to sort of get back into the dating world, to sort of maybe try and remarry. And so his friend in the sort of producing company, I forget what his exact position was, the friend I mean. Rora watched this more recently than I.
I think he was primarily a casting director, but I'm assuming he had some sort of like executive position in the company.
Yeah, I think he was just also sort of a higher up producer guy.
Yeah.
But anyway, he decides that in order to sort of find, like, to screen the best possible dating compatibility for his good buddy, our protagonist, I don't know his name, but they decide to host a fake casting call and for a fake film, basically. And so just sort of audition all of these women for the leading role in the film, while in reality actually screening them to find like which one could be a potential wife for the protagonist. And from there, he finds the resume of a young girl who's like, I want to say like, I don't know, 30 years younger than him or something. They give a name. She's significantly younger than him. And from there, things get epic. Rora, discuss
Yes.
the film. What did you think of it?
Well, I was given insufficient warning when watching
That
this film.
okay. That's not
And
true.
it's real. I forgot about it, to be fair, so I'm sure you probably did.
Hey
Um,
viewers, this film's disturbing if you want to watch it.
it's yes, very disturbing.
Not really,
Uh,
but okay.
it's kind of disturbing. I mean, the
It's
sounds in
disturbing,
and of
but
itself
it's
was
okay.
made me want to throw up, but no, I genuinely thought it was pretty cool. I thought it was fun to watch.
You
And
thought
then
it
it
was
got kind
fun?
of I was gonna finish with, and then it got kind of hard to watch. um, but no, I thought the first like half, I thought it was a little long for what it was. I was like kind of like the last like 45 minutes. I was like, oh, I have to finish this, like sort of. And then that thing happened, and I was like, okay. But I thought that overall it was pretty good. Not my favorite movie, but I thought it was definitely something I hadn't seen before. I liked the son. I forget his name. I liked his character a lot. And also the dad, whose name I don't know how to pronounce, but it's like Ayama or something like that. Um, Aoyama. if anybody knows how to pronounce that. But I liked their dynamic as well, and I thought that that was sort of like up until like the whole big thing with the girl. I thought that was like the best part of the movie. But I enjoyed it. I thought it was pretty good.
Yeah. I absolutely loved this film. Uh, I think the runtime boils down to it being a very methodical, like it's building up very much with a purpose to this sort of last 30 minutes essentially.
Yeah.
And it sets it up perfectly, like beat for beat, like exactly what it's building to is entirely intentional. And I think if it sort of drags a little bit, then it's only so that that ending can have more of the punch that it does, I think.
Yeah, which I was gonna say, like I would have preferred a little bit of a hint because like as much as I realized after the fact why they had done it, in the moment it was like slightly sloth like to get through. You know what I mean? So like just like a little bit to keep it like going, but like after watching it I get why, but like just initially it would have been like a bit easier. You know what I mean?
Yeah, if you had sort of more of like a, well, I
Like there was
guess
just
it's
little clues or
Well, I guess
something.
it's more because you had no knowledge of what
That's true.
you were going into. Because
That's true,
the
yeah.
only reason you watched this was because I recommended it for the podcast,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and so I went into this sort of not knowing that it. I mean, you can see the poster. Obviously, you kind of know something weird's gonna happen, but I sort of knew that this was like a disturbing thing, and so I
Yeah.
knew that like something was gonna happen. But no, I really like the dramatic bits at the like for the first half. It's essentially a pretty straightforward, sort of like cheesy romance type of thing. But if you watch it with the critical eye, you can sort of recognize that not the critical eye really. I mean he's kind of not a great guy. um, and so that's why I thought it would be kind of funny to pair this with Black Widow because of how like it also deals with sort of the manipulation of women, which kind of I felt was like what Black Widow was trying to commentate on, as well as something like I don't know, sex trafficking as well. It was incredibly muddled, but in this, it's so subtle and it's so well done that in the end, it's just like almost hard to keep track of what you're supposed to take away from it. Um,
Yeah.
but I think that if you like put enough thought into it, you get a really like interesting characters. The two mainly it's just our protagonist and the person he selects from the resumes to be his wife essentially.
Yeah. Actually, I wanted to comment on the character thing because like one thing that really stood out to me was like the fact that like for the first not the characters rather the breakdown of like the first half of the movie and the second half. Because it really kind of not bothered me, but it was like I was confused as to why there were so many like very wide static shots that went on for long periods of time. Like for example, one where like the camera was in the living room and they were in the dining room eating dinner, or like I think it was the scene where like they're like in the audition room, like it would just not like necessarily, but there's a lot of scenes like what I'm talking about, like the really wide static shots um that like were kind of I was like why is that, like this is just too long. But then I noticed after Asami, which is the girl, first disappears, um its handheld is predominantly used, or it's at least more like shorter, closer, and there are definitely a significant amount of handheld shots, which I took as like this is a stressor, you know what I mean, like a psychological stressor, because he's sort of like becoming unhinged, like with the whole like dream sequence thing, like it just like it was slowly falling off the wagon, you know what I mean, which I after I realized why they did that, I was like, that's pretty cool. Like I really liked that aspect of it. And like it really did help to like not help, but it really emphasized the breakdown of like the first half and the second half. And like that like sort of psychological like shift, you know what I mean?
Well, I guess we'll just sort of get into the thematic bits then, because I have kind of a lot to I want to talk about with this. Mainly because I don't know. I don't want to like say spoilers because I know a lot of people haven't seen this, and I don't want to like lose all of our audience. But also, I don't want to accidentally give anything away.
I mean, it's kind of hard to not spoil anything about this
Yeah,
movie if you want to
yeah.
talk thematics. So from this point on, spoilers ahead.
We'll put the time code on the screen or in the description / pinned comment to what you can skip ahead to if you haven't seen the film. And then I'll do that in post. I'll find out when they can. Yeah.
Yeah.
We sort of learn about the backstory of the Asami character and sort of what her sort of background is and how and why she's doing the things that she's doing. And we also have obviously been learning about our protagonist and explaining like how and why he's doing the thing that he's doing. And so in the end, we just sort of have these two characters that are crippled in the ending, literally, by what their limitations to their character. How one is sort of manipulating romance to sort of fit him. He doesn't really view women as like autonomous people. He sort of just views them as like an extension of how they relate to himself. Like there's the side character, the receptionist, like he clearly doesn't really care that much about her, except for it's hinted that they might have had like an affair, and how that sort of is a strain on her relationship. She's about to get married, and also he sort of basically just ignores the housekeeper, who's another sort of reoccurring character. And that's why I think a lot of it also, in addition to sort of a commentary on like manipulation of women, etc., which definitely has its thematic place in this, but also I think on top of that is sort of the performances that you put on in daily life. I think a lot of it is about like acting and how he does. I mean, he puts out a casting call and he does get an actress. I mean, even though that's not really what he's looking for. I really found all of that incredibly interesting, as well as a disturbing, like, psychological thriller on top of all of that. And so that's why I really, like, this just really connected with me. Plus, it was 2 a.m. when I watched it. So that definitely was a part of why I liked it so much, probably. But I found it all to be a really well constructed, like meticulous, I think is a good word, like methodical, like structurally. I mean, like not in terms of the story, but in terms of how the story is structured. I thought that it really built to an exact point of what the filmmaker wanted to portray, and everything along the way culminated into a certain point with the ending having the two characters ending up in the same place, crippled, bleeding, etc.
Yeah, honestly, the one I when you were talking, I realized like something that I forgot. Honestly, like there was a kind of a plot hole in my opinion because like the whole movie hinged on him picking her out of like what was it like 30 actually no, he had to pick 30 girls out of like hundreds of people. So like that's like a very small chance and the whole movie hinged on him picking her as one of
Right.
the 30, which I mean like what would have happened if he's just like, I don't like ballet like dancers. Like you know what I mean? Like
Well,
they literally could have like the slightest like thing with her application could have been an immediate like no. You know what I mean?
but this isn't like an ultra realistic. It's allegorical more than anything.
No,
It's
I know.
not
I'm just saying
like,
it's that was like the only like slightly like that is kind of not like that's
well,
like
yeah,
a
but
bit of
I think that it works in thematically. Like, I don't think that's like, I think that's very much a conscious thing where it's like he is able to pick this person who he thinks is like deeply relating to his sense of like, oh, this is a lot of things that like I am feeling. That's another thing. It's like relating to himself more than like empathizing with what she has gone through in her letter. He's like, oh, this is sort of relating to me. And so reading that, sort of just being, the one in like 1,000, let's just say, like that's sort of like the cheesy expectation of a romance of just like, oh, I just happened to spill coffee on your paper and I just randomly saw it and it turns out we're perfect together. And it's just like that subversion of that
No,
into,
I
yeah.
get that, but my point is that from his point of view, yeah, that makes sense. It's like the classic trope, but from her point of view, she was doing it just to basically be like, "Oh, you're just like everybody else, so I'm gonna do this to you." So how did my question is, how did she know that that would work? You know what I mean? Like how, like why did she know what to write that would get him to pick her? That's my issue I had with it because like, you know what I mean? Like that part is like slightly like it makes sense if she were to genuinely not have done what she did to him. You know what I mean? Because then it's like the typical like romance trope. But because she had an ulterior motive for it, it's not. It doesn't like logically make sense that she would know all that stuff that he would like attach to without having like done research or him on whatever, which wasn't hinted at all.
But you're viewing this as more of like a realistic thriller movie where it's like her character isn't meant to be taken literally. I mean, this is entirely essentially allegorical. Well, not allegorical, but I don't think you're looking at it in the right light. I think that she isn't necessarily supposed to be this person who is like, methodically. That's what I was saying, methodical in terms of the filmmaking, not really like she's some sort of, mastermind. Like she is just sort of like representative of like the idea of the dating pool, the idea of the submissive housewife that he has in his mind. Like she isn't really supposed to be this like genius. She just represents what he like. Do you know what I mean? Like
No, yeah, I get that. I'm not even saying that it doesn't make sense. I'm just saying like if we're nitpicking here, I thought it was good. I thought it was well done movie. I don't hate it. I'm just saying like from a like I'm looking at this with a microscopic lens, that part was kind of out of place because everything else was so like consistent and like yeah, I get it's like allegorical or it's like metaphorical whatever, but like in order to have a solid metaphor, it has to be consistent and it has to make sense, and that for me just didn't make sense how that could be a thing. But that's like a very small detail. Like it's almost negligible, but just you were saying something and it sort of triggered that thought. Which is why I brought it up in the first place. But that's what I was saying. I get the whole allegory thing and I get what it's supposed to represent. I just within that representation it felt a little off for me, but that's about it.
Yeah, I still feel like it's, I mean, kind of commentary on just like connection in general, because it's just like you only have like the idea that you're going to meet someone who you are perfectly compatible with, because that sort of echoes the part where he's talking about where like everyone in Japan is lonely, like Japan is lost essentially. And so it's just like that idea of the one person in the sea of just like lonely people, and that being just like the one person as a representative of just like she could have been anyone. That's what made it
Yeah.
sort of so powerful for me, or not powerful, but just like that's what made it feel like what it did, because she is just the one in 1,000. She is just sort of like, it's not, I don't think that she like studied him and like wrote that letter specifically for him. I think it's more of like an not, I keep saying allegorical, but I think it's like she is just sort of like represents everything that he views in like what he's after.
Yeah, no, I get that. Like honestly, before I even knew what this was about, like I even wrote down like how like it was such like a feel good, like the first half of it was like such a feel good like vibe, you know what I mean? Like I was like, "Oh, that's nice." Like I was like genuinely like, and that's why it didn't like stick out at first cuz I was like, "Oh, it's the thing, it's nice, it's fun to watch, it's wholesome. I like it." I liked the relationship that they had because it seemed so like they needed each other and like sort of like because she had nobody, he had his son but he needed like a companion, and it was just genuinely very like nice, like they worked well together. And I did like the fact that she turned out to be some like psychopathic character. I thought that was really cool. But like again, it's not a very big issue I had with it. I just, if we're nit to nitpick essentially, because there's not technically much wrong with this movie. Like, it's a good movie. That's just like the one issue that I had with it, but I genuinely did think it was a very thought-provoking movie, but also very interesting, to say the least.
Well, yeah, it's kind of funny. Like you talked about how, like, for the first half, it sort of feels like a sort of feel-good movie or whatever, that they are like a
Yeah.
happy relationship. But like the funny part is that like you kind of the more you think about it, it's like, oh, that isn't a like happy
No,
relationship. Like
yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
shouldn't have felt good. And that I think like that's the sort of purpose of making that like ending so over the top, like horrifically violent. It's like sort of
Yeah.
almost like a punishment for the audience for like feeling good about that, you know? Like
Mhm.
it was all very subtle, you know? Like he isn't
Yeah.
really like a hugely like scummy, slimy guy who's like trying to, like do all these awful things all the time. Like he has a son, he, isn't like awful to people. Like he just seems like your average guy. But the more you sort of think about it, the more things you like see in his like subtle actions, the things he doesn't do more so than the things that he like actually does do, um, sort of does build up to that point of like, okay, maybe he is getting not what he deserves, but he is getting something that he himself like started. Like he led to this point. And like in addition to that, um the character of Asami, the only thing that she really knew how to do was sort of respond in that way in terms of like violence, because she obviously had a pretty horrific past, pretty unclear exactly what it was, but she was clearly abused throughout her life by one man, perhaps several different people. It sort of changes since it's in like a series of dreams, and sort of contradictory information is given as it progresses. So, but either way, it sort of like builds to these two characters doing the only things they really know how to do. And so, in addition to being like commentary about the sort of like um, view of women and stuff like that, it's also just commentary about like relationship in general, human connection in general, and sort of just like the performance you put on for other people. Whereas being like the relation of being an actor in like a daily life, which I just thought a lot of that was really interesting. And I just really loved the ending a lot. I thought that really tied it all together for me.
Yeah, the ending was definitely I mean, like, I figured something would happen, but I didn't think it would be that. Um I don't really like the fact that, like, she also, well, I don't know if she died, but she was definitely like paralyzed for, or severely injured. I wanted her to win, like, I wanted her to get out of there. Obviously not hurt the kid because he didn't do anything, but I thought it would have been cool if she like walked away, because it would have been like some sort of like, because she won the first time, or whenever, like, she has the other guy, you know what I mean? So like she
Or
won the
does
first
we don't
time.
really
Well,
know that
that's
though.
true. Yeah, that's true. That's true. Well, it leads us to believe that she has the first guy. And I thought it would have been cool if she had won again, because there wasn't anything particularly like hero-esque about the main character. You know what I mean? He was just kind of like an average middle-aged guy. And I thought it would have been cool if she had sort of walked away from it, not unscathed maybe, but definitely victorious. Because so I was kind of like a little bit disappointed that it didn't end like that. Even though it was like, I did like the symbolism of both of them, like bleeding out on the ground, unable to move. Um,
And
but that,
regurgitating like the lines that they had already
yes,
said to each other.
yeah, that I genuinely, I really, that was like the one part of it that I did like, was sort of like the
That's the one
symbolism
part
of
that
what
you
I meant.
liked.
No, about the ending, about the ending, like the way that it turned out, was like the symbolism of what happened, even though she didn't win. Like, I thought it was very poetic, and like sort of like a nice, like, not callback, but like essentially a callback to like the relationship they had in the beginning, which was like, obviously it wasn't good, but like it sort of was like symbolic of these things don't really change. You know what I mean? Like, it's sort of, it's always going to be like this. It's a cycle that's incredibly difficult to break out of. And I thought it was very even though I didn't like her not explicitly winning, I thought it was a nice way to wrap it up for what they decided to go with, you know?
Well, no, I think I thought the ending was perfect. I think having her win would be too like over the top because essentially it boils down to like some of the earliest examples of the genre known as torture porn, essentially, which would be sort of solidified by the Saw franchise in the coming 21st century. But that sort of just like really over the top, I think it would have been too much, even just for the audience's sake, like outside of thematic and like story purposes. Like it would have just been sort of too much to have her continue. And it's just like it's not that our protagonist deserves like what he's doing because it's way more subtle than like your traditional like I spit on your grave like revenge type of thing where it's like the girl is going to come back and like get revenge on the, the horrible abusive guys, where it's just like it's much more subtle and it's much more layered. And so I think having her explicitly win would be sort of contradictory to that like subtlety. um so I guess I did sort of loop around and talk about thematic stuff, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. Like, I think it really just depends on how you view the concept as a whole. Because, like, I think that, like, I just, like, again, with, like, the cycles thing, I feel like it would have thematically made more sense had she had won. But I didn't hate it. I just would have preferred, um, her to walk away from it. But, like, I did think that they did a good job with the ending. And I think that for what they were trying to do, it worked, you know? Like I don't not like it. I would have preferred the other version. You know, but like I get what you're saying and it does make sense and it was good, like it was well executed. I just think it would have like for like continuity purpose of like keeping this theme like this is going to keep happening, you know, like she explicitly says like you're not the first guy or like everybody does this or something like that, you know, and so like she says it in the film, like she actively acknowledges it, you know what I mean? So
I think it's that's looking at it too literally still, because I think
no, yeah, I know.
with having her win, it would be, or with having her like both of them be paralyzed, it makes it more contained on its own, because that means that like she's not going to, because technically we don't really know anything about what she does.
Yeah, that's true.
Most of it is metaphorical, most of it is in service of the thematic stuff, of the sort of psychological stuff, more so than it's like, oh, he's uncovering some like crime serial killer lady and like the ring is like being finished around him. It's like
Mhm.
it's essentially the only thing we know in this universe is the protagonist and his perceptions of the past of the Asami character, and having her sort of it's almost like a not a fairy tale, but just like sort of a classic like moral, not fable almost, where it's just like it's entirely contained. It's not like a traditional like narrative mystery structure or even like a psychological thriller structure where it's like, or horror structure rather. It is more of the psychological, but it is not sort of the mystery thriller or the horror thriller structure where it's like you have your very definitive beginning and ending, um and everything in between is sort of serving rather than like to engage the audience. It's more concerned with keeping the story and having the audience become naturally engaged as we sort of disassociate more and more with the main character and sort of understand what is sort of playing out as we watch the film. Yeah, I liked this film a lot. I added it to my pool of favorites, 100 favorites, meaning that it's in the top 100 films I've seen of all time.
Which is top 10%, right? Because you've seen like 1,000.
I've seen like almost 1,500. We're getting there, almost to the 1.5K, but not yet. So yeah, I mean, probably over or under top 10%. But yeah, it was quite a good movie.
No, I mean, like, I thought it was all right. Like, it's not like my favorite movie. I think technically it was much more well done than I enjoyed it, if that makes sense. Like, I appreciate it more technically than I did like enjoying it. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Which is probably why it's not like as highly rated for me. But I mean, like, I did genuinely think it was really cool, and all like the action and like the violence, I think was really well done.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
definitely liked the thematic stuff more so. Well, I mean, that's just what I sort of prioritize in film and stuff, but
yeah.
yeah. But yeah, do you want to do ratings now?
Yeah, I gave this a 7 out of 10.
Um, I gave this a 10 out of 10, baby. A masterpiece. Um, okay, we're already 2 hours into the recording. Um, let's look at the questions now.
And so it's okay, which movie has the most memorable dialogue?
Memorable dialogue. Um,
Yes.
hmm. I think Boogie Nights has some great dialogue. I like all of the Paul Thomas Anderson stuff. I think he's a really great writer. I like
Yeah.
all the Kaufman stuff. Uh, Coen Brothers stuff as well. I always find that entertaining and stuff. I mean, Tarantino kind of goes without saying. But if I had to pick one, I would probably go with Hiroshima Mon Amour. I think Marguerite Duras, as you say it in French, is probably one of my favorite writers. I just finished her book, The Lover, last night, and it's probably one of my favorite books, if not my absolute favorite. And so, yeah, I would say Hiroshima Mon Amour, written by Marguerite Duras.
Nice.
Are you gonna go or?
Oh, well, no, I can go. I mean, you haven't seen this movie, but definitely most memorable dialogues is in Bruges, and I was vividly reminded of that when I rewatched it yesterday. Uh it's got great dialogue and I quote it all the time. So yeah, that would probably be memorable, my most memorable one.
All right. Well, we're
Yeah.
already 2 hours 10 minutes in, and I
Yeah, we should
the
probably cut it.
idea was that it would be 90 minutes,
Well, we're
but
gonna have to cut a lot of it out.
a lot, yeah, my silences. But yeah, this has been the podcast. Hopefully, we'll have more stuff to talk about. Um, quick, we gotta decide what we're gonna do next time. Okay, we've come to a decision that we were going to do a
Yes.
favorites episode because it's still early in the series of podcasts. So to get to know
Yeah.
us a bit better, we're going to be talking about each of our favorite films of all time. And
Mhm.
the only way you get to know what that will be is by following us on Letterboxd and seeing for yourself what our number one favorite films are. You can find me on Letterboxd, letterboxd.com/realbenchoate. Links in description if this is on YouTube and stuff. I'm also on Twitter at underscore benchoate. Instagram, who cares about Instagram? YouTube, SirChancealot. Links in description. Rora, who are you?
Well, I also have an Instagram because I actually like Instagram. It's my username is Wightman A Art. Uh, the Jesse's Room podcast Instagram is just called Jesse's Room Pod. So go check out that account. We usually post updates to what's going on. Maybe we'll start doing like suggestions for films or questions or polls or whatever, depending on the traction that everything gets. I also have a letterboxed. I don't know the link, but my name was Rora was taken, I believe. Again on YouTube, link in description. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah. See you in the next one where we're doing these every other Friday, by the way. We should have said that at
Yes.
the beginning.
Yeah, probably.
Who cares? They'll figure it out. Every other Friday,
Yes.
depending on when we edit this. We're recording this on a Wednesday, so.
I think it'll
Anyway,
be done by then, yeah.
oh yeah, well, I can edit today. But yeah, that's it.